Hi everyone, this is Kevin Camphor with The Frontier. I'm with Shane Bevel. Shane is the photographer for a gathering place for Tulsa Park, which is the Mammoth Park being built on Riverside Drive. Shane has shot, he told me, between 4,000 and 5,000 photos on site. He also handles the time-lapse cameras there. And we've asked him to pick out 30 of his favorite shots that kind of tell the story of the park from the photographer's perspective. So, Shane, can you begin by telling us give us an overview of the 30 photos that you selected and why you selected them?
Right. So the pictures that I selected are kind of intended. First of all, they're 30 of my favorite pictures.
Right.
I'm not going to show you anything that I don't really like. But they're kind of intended to give you an idea of kind of the overall scope of what I'm trying to do at the park. So the first thing that we're trying to do is create kind of a historic archive of iconic images that show the construction of the park. You know, this park is our Tulsa's Empire State Building or St. Louis Arch or all those different things, and it's that important to the city. And so
right.
We wanted a big historic archive that showed all of that. The second use for it is that we use it in just kind of daily media releases and Facebook releases and stuff like that to tell the stories of what's happening at the park right then. And then there's a couple little side projects that I'm working on kind of within the work. One is I'm trying to show spaces as they develop. Right. Here's what it did look like, here's what it looks like now, and here's what it will look like when it's done.
Right.
And then I got about a year into the project and realized that because of the way construction works and because of equipment and hard hats and glasses and guys having their heads down doing work, that I got a year into the process and I didn't have a lot of faces for the guys and women building the park, and it bothered me because at the same time I came to a pretty stark realization that a lot of this is built really by hand. I mean, we think about machinery and construction, and certainly there's a lot of machinery out there doing a lot of work, but the people are what made it go, and so that bothered me. And so we have some images of some of the workers that I kind of started making an effort to make in order to have their face and their person in the record.
All right, before we go through these, let's start with what you picked, and I totally agreed, like our cover photo. This amazing photo, especially from a distance, looks like a bunch of wires with a construction, a gentleman looking towards the camera. What is it? Blue sky as a background. What is that image?
So this image is the inner form of the chimney, the fireplace at the lodge. And this thing is just an engineering marvel. I mean, the amount of work that went into this and the amount of reinforced steel and everything else is just amazing. And watching these guys build this thing and the care and the time they took to put it all together to figure it out was amazing. And this guy is at the top of the first section of the fireplace looking down. So we're actually looking straight up the inside wall of the fireplace.
And what are these wires, for lack of it? They're not wires. What are they sticking out?
This is some kind of reinforcement that's inside the concrete.
Okay.
Now
I know you're not building this thing, just taking pictures, but
right.
I think that would be a picture people would wonder what are those things.
Right.
So there's some type of reinforcement.
Right.
Okay. All right. Let's go back to the beginning. Let's start with the first few photos that you have shot in sequence, and they're all great photos. This gentleman pouring concrete, is that what he's doing?
Right. Well, no, he's not pouring concrete. So this is a picture of a guy clearing out a hole that they drilled for a pier. And this particular pier sits underneath one of the walls that holds up the land bridge.
Okay.
So,
why did you like the image? What made you shoot it?
It's pretty.
Yeah.
It's pretty. It's a really iconic image. It's early in the morning.
Right.
Sun is low. It's just a pretty image, and still it fits with the theme of the project so far, which is that these are things that you wouldn't see, or things that wouldn't normally be photographed on
Right.
a normal construction site. Normal
Right.
construction sites, we wait till the end, we go in, we photograph the pretty buildings.
Right. Right.
This project is more than that.
Yeah,
It's more than pretty buildings, and all the underpinnings and foundation of the park are also the underpinnings and foundation of the archive and the story behind the park.
Okay. And then we go to, gosh, I couldn't tell you what that is right there.
So this is, I think,
on the crane, the
second. Yeah. So this is the second or third story of the boathouse elevator shaft.
Okay.
And these guys, there's two of them working to remove the forms after they've poured the concrete.
Okay.
And we've seen a lot of concrete being poured so far, and it just always makes neat pictures. I don't know what the final truckload count of concrete is going to be, but high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The land bridge, which people aren't going to see this part of it. Tell people what they're looking at with the red bottom and then the big concrete arch that makes the land bridges. What's this gentleman doing? You told me it was pretty interesting.
Yeah, so this is one of those things, again, what I'm trying to work on is to show kind of right now, to show the underpinnings of the park, the things that people won't see. It's only been within the last, maybe 4 or 5 months that we've begun to see surfaces in the park that you will be able to go and touch and put your hands on when the park's done. Everything else has been underground or below something else or inside of something else. And this is the same way. This is a waterproofing that they're putting on the land bridges. And one of the things I thought, again, that was really cool about this image, first of all, it was orange. And at this point, I had been photographing for about 2 years red dirt and gray concrete and no other color. So I was pretty excited to see orange on the site that day when I got there. But this guy is checking for and marking defects by hand so that they can go back and make sure that every little spot is waterproofed. And again, by hand. I mean, the finishing touches are all by hand and done by people, and I think that's really pretty slick.
And again, that's something no one will see because it's going to be covered up.
That's right.
In fact, it may be covered up by now.
Actually, this is already underground. You can no longer see this view of the land bridge. It's completely underground, and in the final park will be way underground.
Okay. This is just a cool man at work picture with all these, what's that, rebarb, right?
Yeah,
is that what it's called?
Steel reinforcement for concrete is what it is. And this is inside one of the walls that the land bridge sits on. And again, just kind of trying to capture faces and the people at work and the guys and girls that are building this park are a really important part of the archive. Most of them live here in Tulsa or in the surrounding area, and it's pretty important part of the project.
We've got another one with your next picture. What looks like a big hose. What are these guys doing?
So it is a big hose. They're moving this concrete filled hose. It's attached to a concrete pump. And they're dragging it by hand because they're inside of a tree preservation zone and can't use a bobcat to move it. And this is another thing, these guys understand this. They're doing things differently because this project is so big and so different and so overwhelming that, a lot of stuff is the same and a lot of stuff is different. And when I first started going out there, the workers, I don't think quite got the scope of what they were building. Now you go out there and you have a conversation with these guys, steel workers and concrete workers, and they understand and they talk about what it's going to be like when they're able to bring their children back. And so, these very guys may come back to this very spot, in the playground and sit here and watch their kids play on a piece of equipment that they poured the pier for, dragging this hose across the land instead of using machinery to do it.
This was an interesting picture. It looks like a boring office picture, but that's Ewan Ho with the city. He's with the permitting department, and he's at, I believe, according to what you told me, he's at the George Kaiser Family Foundation offices looking at plans, right? Why did you take this photo, and why did you think it was important?
Well, I think the whole process is important. So there's a lot of stuff aside from just the construction that we photographed. You know, donor events and donor tours and planning meetings and board meetings and meetings with architects, and all that's important. All these guys play a part in this. And this was a meeting where the city planning group and the fire marshals and everybody who needed to, permit or sign off on the project came to GKFF to the room that holds all the models,
right,
so that they could see this. And again, it's just kind of one of those things. You can't sit in a room and talk to somebody or look at paper
right,
and describe the scope of the project. It's so big, it's so fantastic that it's hard to see.
This is one of my favorites. It just looks like a drawing or some type of engineering document. You just saw this on the ground?
Yeah, this is an engineering document that, these guys, the workers have these with them all the time, everywhere. Right. And, some people have podium tables that they've built to put these on. But they're working documents, and sometimes you got to do what you got to do. And this was, I think, a steel worker that was pulling pieces, and it was a windy day, and so he grabbed some rocks and threw his blueprints down on the ground and threw some rocks on them to keep them from blowing away.
That's amazing. Wow, that's this tall. You're looking up here at something with this guy with the yellow hat. What's he doing?
So this is one of the columns that's on the boathouse.
Oh, okay.
And again, just trying to photograph different buildings and different places in different processes,
right,
in different steps of the process.
Right.
So he's setting the forms to pour this column. These columns have since been poured, and
right,
and they're working on the roof now.
Right.
But again, the amount of work that goes into this to level this column and to set it and to make sure it's plumb and all those things, that's one of the things that we want to capture in the archive and make sure that we have record of. And because it's, again, that column's going to be there for a long time and is going to be visible to people and is going to be an iconic part of the park. But
no one will have seen, if you hadn't taken the pictures, no one would have seen how they got there, basically, right?
Yeah.
This is a cool picture. That's a chimney, I believe, right? Is that a chimney? What have I got there?
Yeah, that's the fireplace. Yeah, so this is standing in the lodge looking out over the park, and that's the fireplace. This is a view, and I try to do this as much as possible. This is a view that you will be able to go and have this view or something very similar to it when the park is done. And so I try to keep those in mind when I'm on site, when I'm walking around, and make sure that I photograph those. If I do all of this work and none of it can be related to the park in the end, it doesn't have the same impact, right? Whereas if we have indicators of where I am as a photographer when I'm shooting these things, whether that's downtown or the AEP building or whatever, then that ties it to the finished product of the park and has more impact when we go to use those images as in a book or in a film or however the park decides to use them.
I found this to be another fascinating one. A worker making his way out of the beginning of the pond, right? That's the beginnings of the pond, is that right? Walking up those stone slabs?
Yeah. So he's actually standing on the bottom of the pond.
Right.
His left foot there is on the bedrock that is the bottom of the pond. And again, just cleaning up at the end of the day, sometimes the images I make that I like the most are just kind of little quiet moments like this, going down and picking up all the shovels and making sure everything's in place.
So your thought here was here's a worker. I want to get a picture of a worker, or what was going through your mind when you saw that? So I'm going to take a picture of it.
Yeah, so that's part of it. The fact that he's at the bottom of the pond, again, something that's not visible. Will people know that the bottom of the pond is lined with these giant flagstones when the park is done?
Okay.
And will they understand that it's more than just a hole dug in the ground.
Right,
That there's
right.
more engineering behind it.
And you said what would seem like a perfunctory picture of people moving gravel around. There's a little story behind that, right? That gravel is that brought in, or what's the dirt they're moving here?
Yeah, this is soil, and again, a lot of the themes have kind of come to me as I've started photographing, and one of those is the workers and the amount of work being done. That's very hands-on work, and
Right.
this work, for instance, they're placing and leveling soil by hand with shovels.
Yeah.
Moving this soil down the bank. Again, it's workers. Again, we see a sense of place. We can see AEP in the background. It gives us an idea of where we are.
Right.
The PSO building is not going away. So when we stand in the wetlands, when the park is done, and we can see PSO on the horizon or the tunnels there to the left,
right.
Then this image has more impact. So
Yeah.
I try to do a lot of that when I'm on site.
Now you got one here at nighttime. Looks like a guy working on a cable. What's the story behind that?
These are the guys stripping out the precast forms for the arches and the tunnels, and this is a section of the images that I really wanted to show to talk about how we build little photo stories within a photo story. So when they moved the first arch, we had documented that entire process, and they released that on Facebook.
Right.
That said, hey, here's how we built these arches. Here's where they came from. Here's how we moved them to the site. And so this was all part of that. So it's part of kind of the daily reporting of the project, but then also part of, the archive. And
Right.
So
that's the middle of the night. The stamp says 4:28 a.m.
Yeah. So these guys, the precast guys, come to work crazy early at the precast plant.
Yeah.
This was a form that was poured the night before, and they get there, strip it out. And then set it up and pour another form, and then go home and sleep and come back and do the whole thing again the next day.
This man looks like could be herding cattle through the pens or something. What's all this wire here? What's going on with this guy?
This is a steel reinforcement that are inside the concrete arches in the land bridges.
Oh, really?
And again, all these final checks by hand and things that people are not going to see, and that I really hope that the archive as a whole helps them to appreciate, is all the detail work that goes into this.
And then we get into a lot of faces here. The rest of your shots. You talked before we came on, started taping this, about that sense of appreciation. Here's a guy working on. Is he getting concrete together? What's he doing?
So these guys are doing concrete testing.
Okay.
And this is, again, still part of that kind of sub-story of pouring concrete, doing big pours.
Right.
And, when we first started posting stuff to Facebook, and, there was a conversation about whether this kind of image would be meaningful to people.
Right.
And we actually posted this image, and there were 3 or 4 people who posted on Facebook, and we're like, gosh, I'm so excited that you're posting pictures of, the slump testing and the pressure testing for the concrete. That's so cool. It's so neat.
Right.
And so it just goes to show that everybody has a different interest in the park, but I think seeing all of that can be pretty cool and meaningful.
The perspective on your next picture, it looks like the guys got hoses here. You see the PSO in the background. What kind of work are these guys doing?
Yeah, so they're pouring the roof of the maintenance building, which is now underground, and then behind them is the South Land Bridge, which is now underground.
Okay.
And then you have PSO as kind of a sense to give us a sense of place. These guys are actually they're giant vibrating machines to help settle the concrete is what they're working on. But this is another one of those. They had poured the entire roof of the maintenance building overnight and are finishing up at 5:48 in the morning.
And how long were you there for that job?
I think I got there on that job at 2 or 3 in the morning. They had started. but certainly had not finished. So I was there quite a while.
In this next photo, the single individual working the floor, the maintenance building, that's this continuation of what we've been seeing?
Yeah, kind of within that same project, we're switching over a little bit into a group of images where I'm trying to photograph different parts of the park as they progress, and they're not always exact. They're kind of loose representations of the same thing. So this is a guy that's finishing the floor in the maintenance building.
Okay.
And after they poured it all in one night, overnight.
Okay.
And then he's working early in the morning,
right.
8:20 in the morning to finish this out. And then in this next image, we see the maintenance building, and this was shot just a couple weeks ago. And this is the maintenance building, same floor, same location. Now it's got a roof on it, and you can see that there's an excavator parked on top of that, and they are backfilling or burying basically the maintenance building. And so this is kind of that same perspective, that same building at a later date. And so I hope to have a bunch of these to kind of piece together at the end of the project.
Right. Okay.
This is an image that you and I already talked about, but this is kind of the same thing, right? So this is the inside of the fireplace, and if we jump to the next image, then we can see that we have a picture that, again, was shot just a couple weeks ago, looking up from the bottom of the fireplace.
And remind people where the fireplace is, where it's going to be.
It's going to be at the lodge.
In the lodge.
So it's on the west edge of the lodge. And so, again, trying to capture the iconic images from different phases of the construction of kind of these big important parts of the park.
Right. Oops, a couple backhoes.
This is so these these excavators are moving dirt to excavate the pond when they first started this, and this is one of those things that we see every day driving down the street, and it's not a big deal. Except that these things are huge.
Right.
Just like the project, everything is big and much bigger than you think, and a much bigger scope. And I think it takes these guys 2 or 3 scoops to fill an entire one of those giant loader trucks.
Really?
The dump trucks that they have out there.
That's crazy.
Just monstrous machines. And this is kind of that same view again, but now the pond is dug.
Yeah, it's starting to make headway there.
Already, this is actually a good, almost a month ago now.
Yeah.
And so they've made quite a bit of progress even since then.
Yeah.
But kind of that same view.
Looking north towards downtown. Yeah, you can just see the park kind of sprouting out of the ground.
Right.
This is one of my favorites too. As you said, I don't know if every construction crew takes pictures at every construction site, but this one was kind of neat. Explain where they are and what they're doing.
I think it speaks to, the idea that these guys get the scope of this project and what it means to the community and what it's going to mean to them individually. I mean, it's, they will be able to come here with their kids, stand right where they're standing on the top of the boathouse,
right,
and look out over the park. You and Stava saw this view,
right,
and it's impressive. And I think it's starting to impact some of these guys, and they're starting to understand it. And it certainly is impacting me. I mean, you and I talked. There are days when I'm in certain parts of the park where, if I start to think too much about, being there with my now 7-month-old daughter and my 3-year-old son,
right,
a couple years from now,
right,
being there, not even that, just over a year from now, being there and being in that playground,
right,
you start to think about it, and it starts to sink in how close we are and how cool this park is. And so I think that's part of what caused these guys to decide they want to take a group picture.
Yeah. Okay. And now I think we're getting into a series of kind of, I don't want to say portraits because they're not, but they're individuals, workers, right?
Yeah, kind of working portraits, and we can kind of just flip through these. These are some images this is what I was referencing when I was talking earlier about getting a good bit into the project and realizing that I didn't have a lot of faces of the people actually building the park.
Right.
And then also coming to the realization of how important those people were to the park, and the fact that they understand how important the park is to the city, and it just made me feel like I needed to start working to put their faces in the record, and what they do out there on a daily basis. So these are a few of those portraits of different workers.
Now you've been shooting steadily for what, a couple years now at the park?
Yeah.
I know it's changed depending on how much is going on, but
right.
a couple years, right?
Yeah, we started kind of this phase of the project in 2013. We hung the time-lapse cameras. We started visiting the park, covered groundbreaking, started covering some meetings, stuff like that, and started building the archive in 2013.
Yeah.
And then previous to that, I actually shot some stuff for the planning of the park that we shot as early as 2011.
Okay. Let's end on this great photo from afar of a couple construction workers. It's just a great picture, the beautiful tree, a couple guys sitting on the back of a pickup. When was that taken, and how did you happen upon it?
I shot this at the end of November. Typically I go out first thing in the morning, early in the morning, and stay through about lunch, if it's just a normal day. If there's not a big project I'm covering, I spend about a half a day out there. And so I've made a couple pictures of guys, on their lunch break doing this kind of thing, and this was the prettiest of them. What's interesting is where they're parked will be a parking lot. In the final park, and it will be part of the parking towards the end of the road that leads to the maintenance building, and so here they are, enjoying their lunch, maybe in the way that me and my kids, or you guys might have your lunch at the park. And so I just thought it was a cool little slice of life moment to end with, and is among one of my favorite images. I like it a lot.
Well, we appreciate your time, and we'll have to catch up with you in a year. This thing is supposed to just about be done. There'll be a lot more fascinating images between now and then. So
absolutely.
Thanks for your time.
Hey, thank you.